welcome to those of you that are online to the latest in our spring webinar series as part of our Outlook and Policy program that we run here in the Department of Agricultural, Environmental and Development Economics at Ohio State. And without further ado, I'm going to introduce today's presenter, Dr. Yao Wang. Yao is an assistant professor here in the department. She's been with us for nearly 4 years. And she's going to be talking about, I believe the title was related to job deficiency here in the state. So I'm going to let Yao introduce her presentation. If you have questions about the presentation, please put them in the chat or the Q&A section below here on the Zoom marker board down below. And hopefully we can get some questions at the end and we can ask Yao to answer those. Also, when the webinar is over, Diane Miller will be sending everybody a follow-up email, which will have a link to an evaluation form that we'd ask you to fill out. As Yao is a junior member of faculty, it's important for her to have evaluations of outreach and extension presentations. So without further ado, Yao, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Ian. Thanks for the nice introductions. So hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining today's webinars. So I'm gonna start sharing my screen. Okay, I'm gonna talk about a very urgent issue and a very important issue in Ohio, which is the labor deficiency in Ohio. So before I started, I just want to briefly introducing my main area. So I'm assistant professor at AEDE, and I do a lot of research in general regional development. Specifically, I am very interested in different development challenges, for different economies, especially in Ohio. So labor deficiency is one of the key issues I have been working on. So I would love to, share what I have researched, and also would love to hear more feedbacks. So let's get started. So Ohio is the heart of it all. So Ohio have a lot of advantages in terms of development. So one of the biggest comparative advantage is that Ohio is located in a very nice locations that is within a day drive to about 60% of US and Canadian populations, which makes Ohio a perfect location to for distribution, for logistic, and for manufacturing, and many forms of development. On top of that, we also have really nice, industry base over the last centuries. We have a diverse, industry mix, including manufacturing, aerospace, agricultural, and so on. And we also have a lot of nice urban hubs, have really nice, affordable living conditions that has attracted many migrants over the last decades. This makes Ohio, all these different factors makes Ohio a perfect magnet for a lot of investments. So recent years, we have seen a lot of coming investment or planned investment, including Honda and LG in Fayette County. We have Amazon just announced another 10 billion investment in the data centers. We have, there's a brand new, revitalization of Lordstown by GM. And we also have Intel promised about more than 28 billion of investments. And we also have Anduril buildings, a really big investment in hyperscale manufacturing facilities in Ohio. However, even though we have this really big momentums, this is also concerns for investors. One of the biggest, concerns that has been talked about by media, by investors, is the workers shortage. So this is a nice map by U.S. Chamber of Commerce. Sorry. Um, that has shown basically U.S. Chamber of Commerce have compiled statistics that capture each state's worker shortage index. So what is this worker shortage index? So this is basically for every 100 job openings, how many available workers are there? So the index for Ohio is 0.62, which means for every 100 job openings, we only have 62 available labor to fill those positions. So as long as this number is less than one, which indicates there is a worker shortage problems. So among the distribution of the whole nations, Ohio is not the worst, but also is not the best. So the category we fall into is actually we have severe worker shortage problem. This also reflects in the hiring rate and quit rate of the labor force. So we actually have a higher hiring rate than the quit rate, which suggests there's a very likely for the employers to find potential employees to fill positions. So this also reflects on the wage. So if there is a job or labor shortage, employers have to pay a high wages to attract more employees. So this is a nice graph by Policy Matters Ohio that shows that since 2001, Ohio median wage actually hit the Ohio median wage has been below the national median wage for about 15 years. However, in 2023, this median wage in Ohio actually hits the national median. So basically, this signifies there's a large, pretty significant wage increase in Ohio. Further implies that our employers is trying hard to, recruit labor force. To look at it in a more straightforward ways, we actually can look at the job hires in Ohio over the last decades. So job hires count the number of people who start a job with the employers during a given years in this graph. So this is showing the trend of job hires from 2012 to 2024 in Ohio. So from 2012 to 2019, right before the COVID time, we see a pretty steady increase in job hires in Ohio. There's a big drop during the COVID, during the pandemic. But after 2020, we see a pretty strong rebound to the pre-COVID level. And actually, this job hires level is above what we have before COVID. Especially in 2022, we actually see a peak over here. So this likely reflects what we see in the previous slides. Basically, we are attracting a lot of investments, which requires labors. However, we do see a downturn over the last 2 years from 2023 to 2024. So this could mean two different things. One is that actually, even though we are getting investment, they're not creating job openings. This is one possibility. The second possibility is that even with these job openings, these companies are not getting laborers. They're not actually getting laborers. They're not actually getting employees that actually apply for these jobs. So which possibility is this? Let me show you more information. So this is actually showing the firm job gains, basically how many job openings over the last decades firms actually opens. So this is not including, replacing the existing job by different workers. They're actually showing the expanding of job openings. So we see that even though we see a pretty we actually see a drop during the COVID times, not surprisingly. But after the COVID, we actually shows the job gains increase rapidly. And then we don't see a big drop of job gains from the firm side. So this is suggesting what we see in the previous graph is actually from the worker side. The workers are not filling in those job openings. This downturn here is mostly coming from there's potential struggles for the employers to get workers to fill in these job openings. And if we look at we go a little bit into the details of how does the job hires change by different sectors, we actually see a lot of variations. So this graph shows the breakdown of some sectors in Ohio. We see a lot of different lines, but showing different trends. However, this is a little bit hard to see, so I'm gonna break down into different sectors, depending on the sectors that has experienced the most drastic changes. So the first one we're gonna look at is the manufacturing sectors. Basically, this is the sectors has been long being the major engine of Ohio economy, and this is the sector that attracts the most substantial investment in the recent years. So as we can see here, okay, so this is the total job hires for manufacturing from 2012 to 2024. So we see that the job hires in manufacturing pretty much follow what we see in the total job hires, except for we see a pretty steady increasing before COVID. We see a big drop during the COVID, and we actually see a even stronger rebound after COVID compared to the total job hires. So this is likely reflecting exactly what we see in the first few slides. We are getting a substantial investments in these sectors. However, we do also see this big downturn shift for the last 2 years. So again, this is likely reflecting the fact that Ohio manufacturing sector is grappling with a labor shortage problems, especially skilled workers, which we will introduce more details later. And another important sectors we're going to look at is construction sectors. For all this big investments to actually happen, we need infrastructure for the factories, for the investment themselves. We also need construction for new housing for the incoming labor force. And we also need a construction for road development, infrastructure development to support this kind of investments. So construction sector is important. So we see this is again showing the job hires in the construction sectors. So from 2012, we actually see a lot of fluctuations over the years, but we don't see a drastic changes in terms of a general trend over the last years. We do see a big drop during the pandemic, but in the recent years, from 2023 especially, we see a pretty obvious uptick, potentially showing that with the incoming expectation of those incoming investments, there's expansion of construction sectors. To give you a little sense of the labor shortage in these sectors, according to the Ohio Contractor Magazine's report in 2023, the projections indicate that the U.S. construction industry needs over 500,000 additional workers to meet current demands. And this is also true in Ohio. Even though in 2023, Ohio hired more than 10,000 construction workers, which rank our state the 5th highest in terms of construction workers hired among the states, still we see the shortage. Okay. Another big sectors that we actually see a lot of changes over the last decades is healthcare. So unlike construction sectors and unlike manufacturing sectors we just seen, we actually see healthcare, the job hires in healthcare has been pretty steadily growing, even in recent years. So what we see here is we do see a downturn, a dip in the during the COVID, but we see that the trend kind of like rebound back and have this like really steady growth, increasing rates. So healthcare is actually one of the largest and the fastest growing sectors in Ohio. Largely because we have a really, increasingly aging populations that we will introduce later. However, the trend, the upgrowing trend is not universal for other sectors. For example, if you look at hospitalities and retail sectors, we see like a general increasing trend, but less obvious upgrowing compared to the manufacturing sectors. And if we look at agricultural and mining sectors, where the left shows the agricultural and the right panel shows the mining, we actually see a downward trend with some fluctuations over the last decades. So especially for mining sectors, we see a lot of fluctuations, but we see a pretty drastic downward turn. This is likely because of the transition of the energy sectors and also because of the increasing, usage of automations in different industries. Okay, so we do see, a big labor shortage in Ohio, especially in the manufacturing and construction sectors. The question is, what are the causes of the labor shortage? Even though we have covered that Ohio is a very, have a lot of advantages of attracting business and workers. So what are the potential causes behind the labor shortage? Why we have this why we cannot recruit enough workers to fill in this nice job opportunities? So the first reason is actually determined by the population structure of Ohio. So usually in social science, in economics, and in many statistics, when we look at population structure, especially the age structure of the population, we use some bar chart which we call pyramid, population pyramid graph. So this is an example of different countries, the population pyramid graph for different countries. So, this graph specifically is showing the age distribution of different countries. So, for example, for this graph, we see there are two different panels. The left side shows the male population, and the right side shows the female populations. And each bar shows the population count for each age group. So as we go up, we see like the older populations count. So usually when in a population in a region or in a country that population is actually growing, we see a pyramid shape. So we see the wider bottom and the narrow top. For example, in Ethiopia, we see this nice pyramid shape of this graph. However, if the society kind of aging, we will see the population's shares kind of move up. So the top is going to grow wider and the bottom is going to go narrower. And eventually this graph would look like a triangle, just like in New Zealand. And in an more extreme case, if we have more older populations share in the society, we will see something look like Japan. So this is almost like an inverted pyramid. Okay, so actually by examining the shape of the pyramid graph, we can see how the age structure looks like in the whole economy. So how does the pyramid graph look like in Ohio? So this is a graph showing the pyramid graph in Ohio in 2010 and 2022. In the left, we see the 2010 graph, and in the right, we see the 2022. So the shape of the pyramid graph in Ohio looks very similar to the New Zealand like graph, and kind of in between New Zealand and Japan. So what is this showing is that we do have an aging population in the Ohio economy. And as time goes by, we actually see the top of the pyramid kind of go wider, which means the aging problems kind of is getting more severe over time. To show you a more straightforward comparison, this is the populations actually by different age group in Ohio, where the colorful dots, colorful bigger, bigger dots showing the number in 2022, and the gray dot shows the number for this specific age group in 2010. So by examining this graph, we actually shows that among the 6 age groups, the 65 plus group is actually experience the fastest growing from 2010 to 2022. So during this period, this group has experienced more than 30% of growth in the Ohio economy, while the age group between 35 to 49 experienced the most decline. So this age group have experienced a minus 8.4% decrease during this time period. So the implication of this increasing aging trends of the Ohio populations is twofold. On one hand, so we are actually having more people reaching the retirement age. Basically, they're exiting the labor force. However, we don't have enough younger workers, especially those who have an age from 34 to 49 workers, to actually replace them. So this would naturally create this labor shortage problems, especially for manufacturing, agricultural, and construction industries, which are most labor intensive. And second, the aging population also places a lot of pressure on the labor force, especially in the sectors like healthcare. Basically, those sectors are majorly catering to the older older population. So this is creating more labor demand on these sectors, for example, like healthcare, and kind of exacerbate the labor shortage problems in those sectors. So the question is, so basically what we see is that if we just rely on the natural increase of the labor force within Ohio, the problem would not be solved. So the question is, do we have other sources of labor besides the natural growth of the labor source within Ohio? The first, biggest source of labor is the labor from other states or the labor from other countries. So this is depending on the geographic mobility of laborers. So there are, in terms of getting labor from other states, there are different folds of this problem. First of all, in terms of, the first problem is we have to retain local populations. We have to, attract and kind of maintain the local populations by, offering better wages, offering better housing choices to actually keep what we already have in the labor pool. More than that, we also need to think about how to attract migrations from other locations, specifically from other states. And after we get those migrations, how do we retain those migrants? Okay. So we're going to look at how the labor mobility look like in the Ohio by these different aspects. So first of all, how well do we do in maintaining the local populations we already have? So this is a map showing the out migrants rates, basically the number of people who migrate out of their states during the year of 2021 per thousand residents for the whole US. So the darker colors shows higher out migration rates. So if we look at Ohio per thousand residents in Ohio, there's only 15.8 out migrants. So this number is actually not is very, very low compared to other states, which ranks Ohio's migration rates the fourth lowest of any state. So in that sense, we are doing a pretty good job of retaining the local residents. Not a lot of people actually migrate out from the states. Um, and the second photo of this is how well do we do in terms of attracting migrants from other locations, specifically other states. So I don't have like a nice map like I show you before, but we can infer the migration rates or the net migration rates by looking at the census. So we have the population change from the census, and we have the natural change from the census. If we take a difference of these two, we will see how much of the population or the population growth is coming from people who migrate from other states to Ohio. So this graph, this table shows the net migration rates, basically how in net how many migrations we get in the census years from 1960 to 2020. So for a long period of time, from 1970 to 2010, in that we are losing populations. We're losing migrations in Ohio. However, we see a pretty positive trend in recent years. According to 2020 census, we are actually getting more migrations than before. So in that, if we consider those migrants who are migrating out from Ohio and those who are migrating in Ohio, we actually see a net number that is positive. So in that, we have more people moving into the states than moving out, which is a very positive sign. So in that, we are getting more populations by migrations. If we look at the number for the most recent years, in 2023 that we have data, about 184,000 Ohio residents moved to other states in 2022. However, this is offset by more than 185 people that migrate from other part of the country to our states. So in that, actually, we have experienced a positive migration trends since 2019. So in that, we are getting more migrations than so we see this pretty positive trends over the last years. The question is, when we get migrants, how well do we do in terms of retaining them? So this graph actually shows the migration retentions in terms of the US largest metros, according to the Cleveland Fed. So what this graph is showing is the share of migrants, they actually stay in their destinations when they migrate. So basically, they have the data that tracked migrants when they move to other locations. So what they do is look at the arriving state of those migrants and see if they actually leave the state according to their most recent data. And what they see here is actually, the location that did really, really well in terms of retaining their migrants are those bigger, like fast-growing metro areas in the U.S. This include Denver, Nashville, Austin, Dallas, Las Vegas, and so on. So how about Ohio? So actually, if we look at the bottom 10, so the 10 states, the 10 large metro areas in the US that does not do well in terms of retaining their migrants, we have Cleveland among them. So Cleveland area is actually not doing well in terms of retaining the migrants. And if we look at the migrant retaining rates for for the for the metro areas that is within the Cleveland Fed areas, we actually see more details of the regional disparities within Ohio. So this is showing the similar graph, showing the migrants retaining rates, showing in the navy blue bar. So they also plot the national average in terms of the migration retaining rates for all the metro areas in the US. And for those metro areas within the Cleveland Fed areas, only Columbus, Ohio is above average. So Columbus, compared to the national average, is doing well retaining the migrants. However, we do see some other areas, including Akron, Dayton, Toledo in Ohio, that is not doing well compared to the metro average. And actually, this is a graph showing the migration retention rates and the average population growth for those metro areas. We do see a pretty significant positive correlations between these two items. Basically, this is showing that migration retention is a very important factors in terms of population growth for the metro areas. So this is important factors we have to look at when we think about the population growth or maintaining the population growth for metro areas. Okay. So what we see is that Ohio, in general, is not bad in terms of the national average, in terms of maintaining the local populations, but also there's a lot of regional disparities in terms of attracting migrants and retaining migrants. So the average population growth, or if we see this as aspects that affects the labor force expansion in Ohio, it is the composition of all the factors that we just talked about. So this table actually break down different metro areas in the US in terms of their native retention, basically how much do they retain the local populations, migration inflows, how well do they do in terms of it attracts more migrants, and how well do they do retaining those migrants according to the national distributions. And they categorize different metro areas into high and low groups, depending on these three measures. So what we see in Ohio is that Columbus is doing well in terms of it falls into the high native retention rates, high migrations inflow rates, and high migrants retention rates. So Columbus is doing pretty well in terms of all three aspects. However, the case is not true for other metro areas in Ohio, particularly for Dayton, Akron, and Toledo and Youngstown. All these numbers are pretty low compared to the national average, which means if we are thinking about attracting migrants, retaining migrants to expand our labor force, we probably need different policies or different angles in different areas. To give you more evidence on this, this is showing this is the map, two maps showing the spatial distribution of jobs. How many jobs are there in each county in 2022 in the left panel. And we also look at the job growth over the last decade from 2010 to 2022 in each county, where the blue shows the increase and the red shows the decrease. So what we can see is that the jobs opportunities or job openings is not evenly distributed regionally within Ohio. We see more jobs in bigger metro areas like Columbus areas, Cleveland areas, and Cincinnati. However, the job growth is mostly concentrated in the Columbus areas in the middle. Okay, this is a more straightforward, demonstration of the job trends of different CBSAs in Ohio, and we see, as Cleveland, Cincinnati, and Dayton, and Youngstown, Toledo, kind of have a pretty flat job trends. Columbus, Ohio is having a pretty big increase over the last decades, over the last 2 decades. So the job distribution is definitely not even. Another important aspect of the migration trends in Ohio is that if we look at the breakdown of different the education level of the migrations in Ohio, we actually see some like warning signals. One of the biggest concern is that we see college graduates leaving the states in net. So this graph shows the net migration rates of college graduate by states. Well, the green color shows the net positive migration rates. So basically, in net, the states are getting more college graduates than losing it. While the brown and yellow bar shows negative net migration rates. So we refer this as brain drain. So if you look at the Ohio is in net losing college graduates by the rate of 12.2%. So it is pretty large. The rates we're definitely experiencing brain drain. However, it is, if we look at the states ranking, Ohio is not the worst. It's actually above average. However, the alarming signal is that if we look at the time trend of this brain drain rate, Ohio is having more negative net migration rates over time. So you see from 2010 to 2020, we actually see a pretty large increase in terms of the net migrations out of the states in Ohio. Okay, so we have covered what the first sources of expanding labor force is getting labor from other states, attracting labor from other states, so that we can alleviate the labor shortage problems. The second source of labor force expansion is actually reallocating workers from sector to sectors. So if we are seeing more demand from, for example, manufacturing and construction sectors, it is likely we can attract more workers that are working in sectors that has less demand to those high demanding sectors. So this is called sectoral job hopping. So, but sectoral job hopping is not that easy. So this is the graph showing the job hopping in Ohio in recent years, in 2022. So what we see in this graph is each row of this graph is showing the origin job sectors of a job to job flow. And each column is the destination sector that a certain worker moved to. For example, in this sector, in this cell, it shows the job flows from construction sector to construction sectors. And the darker the color, the larger the volume of these job flows. So as you can see, most of the darker colors is concentrated in the diagonal. Basically, most of the job hopping happens within sectors. So workers are often move when they change their jobs, they will often move within the same industry. We see more, within sector hopping in healthcare and social assistance. But we do see cross-industry flow. Basically, people are switching from one industry to another industry, especially from administrative and support services and manufacturing, and which is here. And we also see pretty significant amount of job flows from retail trade and accommodation and food services. So why are people, but in general, we still see a pretty significant trend, which is if people do consider switching their jobs, they switch jobs within the same industry or the same sector. So why are people more reluctant to switch across sectors? There are different reasons. The first one is, actually, this is the important one, is that a lot of the skills are specific, are industry specific. And it's really hard to transfer from one sector to another sector according to their skills. This also could be relating to licensing and credential barriers. To work in certain sectors, for example, healthcare, constructions, it is likely some of the workers need to get some licensing. And if they switch sectors, if other sectors workers want to switch to healthcare and constructions, it takes time and energy to get those kind of licensing. It could also be professional network and social capital that is hard to move from one sector to other. And also, this is also related to wage premiums and career path within the sectors. Those are the assets that is really hard to carry from one sector to another. It is also very costly, and there's the risks of switching sectors, not only of losing the social network and wage premium, but also, another thing behind this is the informations. You probably would have some information barriers of what kind of jobs that suits a certain worker better in a totally unfamiliar sectors. So there's a lot of reasons behind the sectoral thickness. People are reluctant to switch sectors, even though there's more job openings happening in other sectors. So this contribute to this labor issues, labor shortage in terms of Ohio, especially during this time where we see some of the sectors are experiencing more investment, therefore more labor demand, while some sectors are not. So if we look into the job sectoral changes in terms of different sectors, we actually see different patterns. So the first sectors we're going to look at is construction sectors, which is one of the sectors that actually have a lot of demand recently. This is showing the breakdown of the incoming workers. Where do they work before they come to the construction sectors? So this is the origin sectors. So what we see is that more than half of the flow, job flows, actually from for the construction sectors is coming from within the constructor sectors. So this is what we expected. Most of the construction workers that we get still come from construction sectors. But we do see significant inflows from administrative support, retail trade, and manufacturing. Okay, so but in general, we see, at least for the construction sector, we see a high level of internal worker recycling within the sectors. This is similar to healthcare, which is the fastest growing sector in Ohio. More than half, actually, way more than half is like 55% of the jobs. The hiring in the sector is coming from the same sectors, which shows even stronger internal circulations. However, if we look at manufacturing, the story is different. So only 30% of the manufacturing hires is from workers who used to work in manufacturing sectors, which is a much lower percentage compared to construction sectors and healthcare sectors. So what this is implying is that, in the manufacturing sectors, a lot of the employers is trying to get workers from other sectors. And there's more cross-sectors flow compared to other sectors. This has important implications because, first of all, manufacturing is demanding a lot. The internal circulation might not satisfy the needs. The second implication is that since the manufacturing sectors is hiring a lot of cross-sector job hopping workers, it may face a lot of problems in terms of the sectoral hopping that we mentioned. For example, if the manufacturing sector is hiring someone from the healthcare sectors, they may need a specific training that is not transferable from healthcare sectors and manufacturing sectors. So as we will talk about, this could create what we call skill mismatch or skill misfit problems that needs additional effort. Specifically, what this means is that specifically for the manufacturing sectors, they may face a problem that even though they have a potential labor pool they can hire workers from, they might not have the skills they need. So this is a nice summarization of National Skills Coalition, basically looking at the education requirements breakdown of Ohio's job. So the first one is showing the Ohio's jobs by educational recruitment in 2018. Specifically, they break down the requirements into 3 categories, including 4-year degree, skill training, and high school equivalents. So the majority of the jobs in Ohio actually require skill trainings beyond high school, but not a 4-year degree. Okay. However, if we look at the jobs and workers comparisons by education levels, we actually see a pretty large gap between the jobs that is posted that require skill training and the workers that actually have skill training experience. So there's a pretty large, shortage in terms of this education level, skill training education level. And this is especially true for manufacturing sectors. So the Wall Street Journal has a really nice article basically titled, "The mega factories are coming, now the hustle is on to find workers." So specifically, this is focused on the Central Ohio. We're getting a lot of investments as we talk about. However, how to find the workers and how to find the workers with the specific skills they require is tough. So, so one of the paragraphs they mentioned is that, Ohio is trying to help with this workforce development a lot. And one of the big project is basically do skill training in Columbus State Community College. So there's an interview that covered in this article. One of the participants actually says that what they experience, the training they experience, let them know, actually allow them to know that the manufacturing sectors or investment we are getting is quite different from the traditional manufacturing sectors they imagine or we imagine. So actually, even though the current or the recent future investments falls into the manufacturing big category, they might be super different from the manufacturing in a more traditional way, which means they may need more specific training that the traditional manufacturing does not need. Besides the skill misfit and the the sectoral changes and geographic mobility we have talked about, there are other challenges that are closely related to the labor shortage that we didn't get time to cover today. Specifically, we have a lot of investment that potentially attracts more migrants over the years. How do we provide affordable housing to the incoming migrants? Is going to be a key issue. Besides that, we also have to think about how do we connect the less developed areas, especially the rural regions in Ohio, that does not have a lot of job growth over the last years, but still want to enjoy the job opportunities. How do we connect where they live and where they work? So how to fill in the transportation and infrastructure gaps would be a key issues. And how do we provide enough healthcare and benefits, childcare and family support to those workers to attract them to move to Ohio would be a key issues too. And how do we distribute the information that, for those workers who are considering moving to Ohio or the workers who are considering to hop between sectors would be another challenge. And lastly, the most important determinant of labor force is how do we determine wage? This would be a key issue to think about in the future. So thank you so much. Basically, with a really short time frame, it's hard to cover every aspect of this really important issues. So there's more to come. So you're welcome. I really appreciate if you have any questions or feedbacks, please feel free to email me at my OSU email. And also I post my work, especially policy work, extension work at my personal website here and my AED website. I'm still working on, posting everything there. And feel free to check it out. I will post more fact sheets and policy reports there to provide more information I didn't have time to cover today. And also, I really appreciate your feedbacks, and Diane would follow up with an evaluation form, and I would really appreciate if you can fill it out to improve my future work. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Yao, for an extremely informative and interesting presentation. Anybody who's still online, I encourage you to put your questions in the chat or the Q&A. I guess as I listened to the last few slides, a couple of questions came to my mind.
Yes.
You have a bullet point, right, about other challenges, wage and benefit competitiveness, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yet, if I go back a couple more slides where the job shortages relative to the skill shortages. So I think it's that slide there. So if you've got, simple economic analysis would say that if you have 54%, then that bottom of the second graph, the middle lines,
Yeah.
you don't have enough people with the skills training, but you've got the jobs. What do the wage premiums look like in that sector? If what are the incentives to people to gain those skills if there's a shortage in that area and wages are supposed to do some of the job of getting people to move into that. Otherwise, I guess if markets don't fix the problem, right?
Mhm. Yeah.
Um, what's the policy? What are the policy options, do you think?
Thank you so much, Ian. This is a really great question, and actually, this is the key question here. We have labor, but it's like, how do we fit this skill demand, right? So, you know, like, first of all, wage premium should be, higher to attract more workers to actually take this kind of training. So, but it's not necessary to reflect in the wage level itself. There could be in different forms. For example, I know a lot of companies right now is doing this skills training for free, right? Like they are encouraging or they even give compensations to the workers who are interested in. So I know Honda, they also do, they send workers to Europe to get this kind of the skill training they need for the companies, and it's totally for free and get compensations. So this kind of policy would actually really help. And I guess another important policy instrument that could be really helpful is, information gaps. So we know a lot of people might be interested in this kind of jobs, this new job opportunities, but they simply don't know how the jobs look like, right? So I think information sessions in college, in universities, in high school would be really helpful in terms of, recruiting labor force.
So, what's the risk that Ohio gets into a bidding war with other states that are in a similar situation?
Um, So first of all, I think there's definitely competitions there. First of all, migration or like moving to another state is definitely not without cost, right? It is costly. So if there's a similar opportunities in Ohio and say Michigan, or close by states, those residents who already live in Michigan State would choose Michigan because they don't need to pay for the migration cost, right? So um, so there's definitely, if there's a similar incentives in similar states, it's gonna be more competitive. It's gonna be harder for the Ohio for us to actually get more labor force from other states. So I guess to actually attract, to kind of get advantage in this competition, Ohio, we have to think about more ways to make the state more attractive, or even compensate workers to cover some of the migration costs. For example, to provide affordable housing, to provide temporary housing when they travel here, to cover some of the travel costs, and so on.
So, are there any questions in the chat room? I don't see any. We have a couple more minutes. So, if anybody has a burning question to ask Yao, please go ahead and write that in the chat or the Q&A. I guess my final question would be, we're in the tertiary education sector. We're supplying those students with 4-year degrees, and apparently we have a surplus of people with 4-year degrees relative. And I guess we're seeing out migration by many of those
Yeah.
individuals with those degrees.
Mhm.
So, but from if you were working in the Ohio Department of Education and you were thinking about how to restructure tertiary education in the state, um, it sounds to me like putting more money into community colleges or tech schools or apprenticeship systems is how you're going to solve this issue of skills training relative to the jobs that need certain types of skills.
So it sounds like, yeah, so we definitely need more investments in terms of skill training for sure, because we have this like huge gap in these sectors. But also another aspect of this problem is that even while we are getting more investment in the manufacturing sectors, we are also getting more investment and therefore more labor demand from the high-tech technology R&D sectors. I did not include in my slides here, but we do observe more demand for those, college and above degree skill groups. So we do see increasing demand, probably not immediately at this right now, but we are expecting more demand on that sector too. So I still think we should, try to, support our higher education system, try to retain those skill or skill laborers, because we do have demand here.
Okay, well, we've reached 1 o'clock. We've met our scheduled time of 1 hour for the webinar. So once again, I'd like to thank Yao for presenting a very interesting discussion for us today. And if anybody who's been online today, you have any follow-up questions, feel free to go ahead and email Yao with your questions. And again, you'll be getting a message from Diane Miller relating to filling out an evaluation of today's talk. So I'd like to thank everybody very much for attending today. Diane, I don't remember, but what's our next upcoming webinar? Do you remember?
Good question. You asked too fast. 1 second, and I will get it for you. Next month is Anna Kachova talking agricultural land loss to development in Ohio and the Midwest.
Okay, well, that'll be an interesting webinar next month to look forward to. So once again, on behalf of the department, I'd like to thank Yao, I'd like to thank Diane for putting together the technical details, and for everybody for attending today. So I wish everybody a good rest of their day. Thanks very much, and we'll see you next time.
Thank you.